Right now, later than in some listings, the topical discussion gets underway with David Dimbleby.
Tonight we're in Wolverhampton, and welcome to Question Time. And good evening, everyone, whether you're at home or here in our audience waiting to put questions to a panel who don't know what they're going to be till they hear them. Our panel, the Conservative Defence Minister, Anna Soubry, Labour's former Deputy Prime Minister, John Prescott, the Deputy Leader of UKIP, Paul Nuttall, the former Islamist extremist who recanted and is now a Liberal Democrat parliamentary candidate, Maajid Nawaz, and the ex-executive editor of the News of the World and a friend and ex-colleague of Andy Coulson, Neil Wallace. Well, we have many interesting questions to get through. Let's start with William Tominey, please. William Tominey.
Does hiring Andy Coulson show David Cameron has bad judgment?
Hiring Andy Coulson, does it show David Cameron has bad judgment, John Prescott?
Well, since I wrote to him on the first day he was about to appoint Coulson when he was in the opposition, leader of the opposition, warning him he'd be in real danger if he appointed this man, because I had been involved years before with this phone hacking, and I knew that he was actively involved in it. He hadn't been convicted, now we know he has, and he still took him on. It was only I think there were many others actually, even his own deputy leader told him not to do. So that was a matter of judgment. Bad judgment, and he made a mistake, and he's now paying for it.
Neil Wallace, I said you were a friend of Mr. Coulson's and indeed a colleague of his. Did David Cameron show bad judgment by hiring him?
On what he knew at the time, no. There was a piece, very interesting piece in the Times today, which pointed out that Coulson was actually very good at his job. Can you make an argument that if they had looked at the wider picture with hindsight? Maybe. I tell you what I do think. I thought Cameron, just like I agree with Judge Saunders, I thought he and the various political leaders yesterday made an appalling error of judgment when they issued statements, day before, when they issued statements condemning him while there was a trial still going on before the other verdicts had been heard.
But that's a slightly different matter from whether the Prime Minister was right. Because as John Prescott said, and I'd like you just to address that, there were a number of people who went to the Prime Minister and said, you know, you mustn't have this man in number 10, weren't there?
Well, there are. But just to finish off my point there, you know, you're entitled to a fair trial whether you're employed by a Prime Minister or a plumber, you know, and that's the point of complaint. But going back to the point, yes, there were people who advised against it, but then again, there's people who are always going to advise you. And if you remember, the Labour Party hired Damien McBride, for instance. Now, there's no suggestion that Damien, who I know and is an interesting person, has done anything criminal at all. But these can be fine calls, and with hindsight, I can understand why John Prescott wants to fill his boots.
Well, two of the journalists went to jail in 2006, for God's sake, working for the same paper. This wasn't just a rumour. I knew, and I was saying I was being tapped, and they refused to believe it. So there was evidence.
You didn't know that Andy Coulson was responsible. That is the point. The point is that when we had the Leveson inquiry, and there was a lot of evidence taken by this independent judge-led inquiry on oath, and that the conclusion that Leveson came to was that the Prime Minister didn't do anything wrong when he hired Coulson based on the evidence that in effect was put before him. Now, forgive me, John, I don't know whether or not you gave evidence to the committee, for example,
I did, yeah.
the Select Committee. But the Select Committee in 2010, they came in an all-party committee, the DCMS committee, Media and Culture Committee, came to the conclusion that Andy Coulson was not responsible and was not involved in phone hacking. There was a police investigation. But they believed him. Yeah. And also, hang on, so sorry to interrupt, but let me just say this. Leveson also found that on 4 occasions the Prime Minister, before he hired him, challenged him and said, were you involved in it? 4 times he said no, like he said to others, and so now our Prime Minister has apologised for that. He did the right thing in apologising, but he did not do the wrong thing in taking him on based on the evidence before him.
All right, the man there.
So Cameron was warned, but why didn't he... Oh, sorry. Is it because, why did he appoint him if he was warned? Was it just to toady up to Murdoch?
No.
The Murdoch issue is, of course, at the centre of this, isn't it?
It is absolutely right that there were allegations going around, but there were a number of investigations that absolutely found that Coulson was not involved in phone hacking. The Prime Minister did the right thing.
Well, Leveson said, I can't give judgments on this until the court cases will be underway.
No, not on the wrongs and right, not on whether he had done it. No, but whether the Prime Minister was right. Leveson was clear that the Prime Minister had not done anything wrong.
All right, hang on. Yes, you can come in a moment. Paul Nuttall first, though.
I think quite clearly it was an error of judgment. I mean, Mr Coulson had resigned from the News of the World in 2006 under a bit of a cloud, and he was hired in 2007. He'd been warned by journalists, he'd been warned by, as Lord Prescott has told us tonight, by politicians. Allegedly, he was warned by Buckingham Palace not to take this man on, and he listened to nobody, and he went ahead and did it. Now, we either took Coulson on because he thought he was a bit of a man of the people. You know, the Tories at the time were being perceived as toffs, and this guy had the common touch. Or he took him on because he was trying to cosy up to News International in the run-up to the 2010 general election.
Nonsense. There's no evidence. It's a very serious allegation.
If that is the case, it proves there is an insidious relationship between the press and politicians in this country, and it needs to go away and go away now.
This was not the case.
Why didn't he do security clearance? When I came on a cabinet, everybody goes there, or our officials, they are given security clearance before you get into that job. He did not give them security coverage at the highest level. He did some at the lower level, but he didn't do it.
I know, but it's no good saying it's not true while John is speaking. Let him make his point, and then you can say it's not true. You will have your chance, because that's my job to make sure you do. And it's your turn.
Thank you. Look, you know, yes, he was warned. Nick Clegg, the leader of my party, warned him before the appointment in 2010. So yes, he was warned. But actually, even the Prime Minister, David Cameron himself, has said something which I genuinely believe in. Sorry, but Paul, you know, John, I know you've been a victim of this. It's not about, and you have suffered as a result of it, but actually it's not really
that's
about...
That's why I'm saying
this.
Yeah,
I know, but it's actually really about people like the McCanns, who lost their 3-year-old daughter, because the Prime Minister said that the test here is the victim test. Yeah. If Millie McCann's family, if Gemma Dowler aren't happy with what's going on, I mean, look, they lost their 13-year-old, Gemma lost her 13-year-old sister in this, and if they're not happy with what's going on, then really something is going wrong. And that's who are the real victims here. And the Prime Minister did say something. He said that's the victim test. We've got to look at how the victims respond to this. They aren't happy with the situation. They wish he wasn't appointed. They're not happy with the outcomes. And it's not really about me. It's not about you and your friends. It's not about us here. And though John has suffered from this, it's really about those who've lost family members. And that's who we should really be looking at. And they're still pushing for justice. And they're the people we should be really...
You sir at the very back.
Weeks ago, all of the party leaders were taken, had their photos taken holding copies of The Sun. Doesn't that prove that they would all have done exactly the same as Cameron did?
He said that by holding copies of The Sun for publicity, your party leader doing exactly the same thing as Cameron, cozying up to Murdoch. That was the question.
Well, it was wrong, and I wouldn't have done it.
But Tony Blair did the same, didn't he? Went off to make speeches for Murdoch
as well.
You think that was wrong?
Well, I think the relationship, this incestuous relationship between the press and the politicians is a serious matter that you have to address yourself to. And with Gordon Brown and indeed Tony Blair, there was this feeling you had to cosy up to the Murdoch press and they'll win the election for you. That's the problem. I used to argue very strongly against that because Rebecca Brooke particularly played them both off. And I just thought that was wrong. And they played it not only to Labour, but to other political parties as well. That needs to change. And that's why Leveson's rules need to come in, so we don't repeat it again.
I've got a vague memory that Nigel Farage had dinner with Rupert Murdoch, didn't he, just recently?
Did he tell you?
No, I believe he did. I mean,
you believe he did?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing with all this, I suppose, is that newspaper sales are going down radically in this country, and in the next century, I suppose, I think it's by 2040 there'll be no newspapers because people now are getting their information from the internet. So you won't have people cozying up to the Sun or any other newspaper organisations. I think the days of the big press barons are behind us, and I think it's a good thing.
Neil Wallace.
Sorry, let's just get the chronology of this slightly right here. Okay, the original arrests in phone hacking were in 2006.
Yeah.
There was a Labour government in power. He was the Deputy Prime Minister. There were jail sentences in 2007. He was the Deputy Prime Minister. Labour were in power for the next 3 years, during which time there were various Home Secretaries, all of whom had access to this file, all of whom talked to the Metropolitan Police about this. And let's not forget this bit either. Do you remember a bloke called Tony Blair? He became, in 2010, the godfather to Rupert Murdoch's children. What happened here was Labour ignored it. The Labour government he was the Deputy Prime Minister of because it suited them.
Rubbish.
And the truth, well, the evidence is there.
Let me give you the
so
evidence.
why did not the Home Secretary, the various Labour Home Secretaries, why did they not demand further inquiries? Because they chose not to. Do you know why? For the simple reason that they wanted to cosy up to Rupert Murdoch. Now, you can actually quite justifiably ask, why did politicians do this? Why is it that in my time as a senior executive there, and incidentally I was an editor of a Mirror Group paper that was supporting Labour, right? Why do politicians always are prepared to crawl over broken glass to politicians?
All right.
Because they want to reach you.
Let me just answer that. Let me just
John Prescott.
The relationship with Murdoch, you know, I've been against for years. I had nothing to do with him, never went to his parties. I just thought it was wrong. Let me just come to the point, though. When those people were prosecuted, they were working with you and Coulson. I don't think you were there. You became the deputy leader later, in the middle of all this, right? But one of the real problems was I was trying to convince people my phone had been hacked. The police said it's wrong. The Crown prosecution said it was wrong. Your papers said it was wrong. I was just shouting as a left-winger. It's now been proved it was right. So what we said, and I managed to get, we've got to get a Leveson inquiry. It must not happen again. Let the courts look after the criminal acts, and let's face it, your papers were really involved in massive actual hacking of people to thousands of people. But you all denied it, and you all attacked me as a man just talking.
All right, the man up there.
I got hacked too.
Yeah, you know what I'm just telling you.
Go on.
Yeah. In 2006, Mr. Prescott, you said that you already knew.
Pardon?
In 2006, you said that you already knew. So why did you do nothing about it then? When you was in a position of power to do something?
Well, no, it's a fair point. If I'd have had the evidence, what's interesting, I watched the Panorama programme the other night. They said they told a member of the cabinet. Nobody can find out who that was or have a memory. They never told me. I'd have been writing to the courts if I'd have found out. But I was being denied by the police, denied by the prosecutor. It was only later when they came and told me that my phone had been hacked 44 times.
John,
that was when they were exposed.
But John, it is quite remarkable that you were the Deputy Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And one of the most powerful positions in government, and you couldn't go to your Prime Minister?
I had to get... I did talk to... Listen, please, I did tell my Prime Minister. Of course I did. But they would say, what is the proof, right? That's the first point.
So those...
And I was denied that. They told them there was no proof. It was only when the courts yesterday, you and your lot were involved in the papers, Murdoch, tapping thousands of people. You all said it's a rogue reporter, and then it became out it's thousands of you at it. You lied all the time. You were asking me why I couldn't get it. I had everybody against me until the Mirror affair. Then that gave it.
All right, Maajid.
The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, because I do accept Anna's point that you can't be Deputy Prime Minister of the country and not. I think actually there's something of an incestuous relationship going on here, and it's all about Murdoch, and it shouldn't be. It should be about the broader questions of what the regulation should look like, what the structure should be. Is it ipso? Right. Is it the Royal Charter? And we're too busy fighting over whether who knew Murdoch, who was his best friend, who was his godfather. I mean, why is it all about Murdoch? And there are plenty of journalists out there who weren't involved. Local journalists who are doing good jobs. Good people. Wait. Good people who are local journalists doing good jobs. And let's not tarnish the entire profession. Let's not just make it about Murdoch and start discussing the solutions about how to regulate this so it doesn't happen again.
Leveson.
Fewer and fewer local journalists. The man in pink there, in the pink shirt.
Going back to Leveson, I think David Cameron is using Leveson in the same way as Tony Blair used the Hutton report as a shield.
No, because the Leveson inquiry was judge-led. People gave their evidence on oath. He took evidence right across the board. It took 8 months, and he made his findings. And whilst, obviously, with the benefit of the hindsight which we now have, given the evidence at the time in front of the Prime Minister, Leveson and others have found that actually he made a decision that, given that evidence, was not a wrong decision.
Leveson dealt with all the points that arise out of the employment of Coulson. That he had all the evidence on it and listened to all of it under oath, or that he listened to some of it and exonerated the Prime Minister on some of it, but some he didn't address.
He certainly looked at the events that had been leading up to the employment of Andy Coulson. He was employed originally in 2007. There were then subsequent inquiries by the Metropolitan Police, which John can quite rightly be cross about. But again, he was cleared in all those police inquiries. There were other inquiries, as I've said, from the Select Committee, and again, they said they believed him when he said he was not involved in phone hacking.
All right, the woman there on the gangway, and then I'll come to you in the centre.
I'm not sure the exact words, but I think David Cameron said himself, I gave a friend a job. So no matter what people were to tell him, John, no matter what bad things people were telling him about Andy Coulson, he was his friend.
I don't think honestly, I don't think he was a friend. He was. I know this sounds difficult.
I think he used those words. I think that was what he said in his speech.
No, he said he gave him a second chance because he'd been sacked or rather, he'd resigned from the News of the World. But honestly, I don't believe that they were ever friends.
The woman in spectacles there in the fourth row.
It seems to me that everyone's going back to the Leveson inquiry, but it seems to me that David Cameron rushed that through because he knew for a fact once the court case came to light and Andy Coulson was sent down, he'd have that to protect himself. Fact of the matter is, the Leveson inquiry should not have been held until the court case had been heard. If the Leveson inquiry was held now, it'd be a completely different reaction they would have against David Cameron.
All the political parties agreed to the terms and the conditions, and it was the right thing to do the Leveson inquiry.
I'll take one more point from the man at the back there, and then we're gone. You, sir.
How many other organisations and newspapers, including TV journalists, are guilty of the same offence?
And what is the offence?
Phone hacking.
No.
Well, actually, I think this is my point, that I don't think it's just about Murdoch or News Corporation. I think this was a widespread problem. We've picked on one company and one symbolic representation of the media generally. And that's why I think it's high time we start focusing on the solution to make sure that what Gemma Dowler is saying, the campaign to make sure that justice is delivered and that there's regulation, whichever shape it takes. And to be honest, the Royal Charter that was proposed, that basically was a sort of a voluntary code for journalists to subscribe to, they haven't subscribed to it. So there's two models that are currently competing with each other. The journalists want the ipso model. They've got their own regulation thing going on, and the Royal Charter is there, the Parliament ratified. They've got to start working together to find a solution for the sake of the McCanns and for the sake of the Dowler family, to find justice for people that actually lost their families and suffered and revisited these horrors.
Can I ask Neil? You're asking me if you have the power as the Deputy Prime Minister. I tell you, it's not all that great. But leave it aside, that's Nick Clegg. But look, did you, when you were the Deputy Editor to Coulson, did you know that this was going on? Did you have any indication, or did you just sit there as a deputy, sometimes substitute, and not know that all these stories in the paper were coming from hacking?
Well, I guess that I was a bit like the Deputy Prime Minister who didn't know anything either. Really.
Are you saying you didn't know? Are you saying you didn't know?
I have always said that I thought that phone hacking was disgusting, and was wrong.
But did you
and
know?
Should not have, no, I didn't.
Did you not
Right,
suspect?
so you were just bloody incompetent.
But Neil, did you not suspect?
Coming from the Deputy Prime Minister, the bloke who was second in command of running the country, I don't know who you are to call anybody bloody incompetent.
But when,
Well, you certainly were, and you must have known.
But when you get a story, one of the things that you say...
What you just said is like...
When you get a story, you look at it and you say, surely, hang on, what's the source of this story?
Like that.
Well, it did when I worked as a journalist.
Yes, but you didn't work at that level, did you?
No, I didn't. I accept that.
There is
quite
another
pleased I
issue
didn't,
here that I
actually.
wondered whether we could
Briefly,
just move on to. Briefly. We have now had an 8-month trial. This has been going on now for 3 years. There was Leveson, and there is a continuing wrangle about it. The latest estimates is that there has been, in the region of £40 million, 200 detectives have been tied up on this for 3 years. For me, I have to wonder, at a time when there's only 30 detectives investigating Operation U-Tree, which is into child sex abuse, they've only spent £3 million on child sex abuse, whether we have proportionality here, or whether there is a time to look at this and think, you know what, if you took 20% of that 40 million, invested in investigating child sex abuse, whether that might have been a better use of the money?
Absolutely right.
To keep you lot in check.
Absolutely right.
Really?
Yes.
More than investigating child sex abuse.
And some of us
Now you'll think twice.
Really?
Now you lot will think twice before you ever take a wrong step
And
like
so
that.
that price is that a paedophile can walk free.
No, there's separate money for that. You can't compare it.
Keep in mind that child sex was involved in the story, because we're talking about Millie McCann's family. So it isn't... Yeah, Millie Dow's family, and both of them, McCann's as well.
Yeah.
So child sex was involved in the story, and
Nobody
they are
is above
victims
the
of
law.
this. And so,
Nobody
of course,
is
there
above
needs
the
to be
law.
accountability.
Nobody is above the law.
Absolutely.
Nobody is above the law.
But there's
And
an issue
remember,
of
some people
proportionality,
pleaded
Anna.
guilty in all of this. We
Yes, they
forget
did.
that. That's not just the conviction of Coulson. There are, I think, 4 other people who actually pleaded guilty because precisely of this good investigation by the
All right, I want to move on. Take a point from you, sir. Bang centre there in the middle, and then
Thank you
move
very
on.
much. During this last 3 years, listening to the panel, Murdoch has doubled his wealth. It's cost the country £120 million. Who is going to send him the bill?
He will get it. He will get it. It is said they are now considering a corporate liability, right? And that's why he's being interviewed by the police. We can't go into details, but I can tell you one of the consequences. If anybody's found guilty, they carry the full costs. So hang on, he might have to pay for it.
All right. Let's move on. We've had 20 minutes or so of this. At home, you've got comments you want to make. Text us. Use Twitter. Our hashtag BBCQT. You can follow us at BBC Question Time. You can text comments to 83981. And if you want to see what other people are saying, push the red button. But keep those tweets coming. We like to trend every Thursday night. And we usually do. A question from Graham Sedgley, please. Mr. Sedgley.
How fearful should we be of British combatants returning from Syria?
Anna Soubry, you start on this one.
Well, of course, we should be fearful. These are usually young males. They are utterly committed to a cause which I think most of us overwhelmingly would say is the wrong cause. They will have gone off and engaged in fighting, and they will no doubt come back even more convinced of their cause. I would hope that they wouldn't. And so, yes, we should be fearful. But I also think we need to say this, and I think it does have to be said. The overwhelming majority of young Muslim men, just like all Muslims, are ordinary, good, decent, law-abiding people. This is a very small minority. It's still significant because they are so dangerous. But we think that there are somewhere between 400 to 500 who are out in Syria or in Iraq who are jihadists. And there are various measures which the government is already taking to make sure that we reduce the numbers. I also hope that our Muslim community, which is good, as I say, and law-abiding, decent people, also themselves make sure that these young men, because they are usually men, cannot find succour, cannot be, in some cases, brainwashed, as some of them have been. So when we all work together on this, in various agencies and as a society, we hope that we will minimise those when they return.
Do you make any distinction Do you make any distinction between going abroad to fight for a cause and coming back here and creating mayhem in Britain? Are they not two slightly different things?
No, not really, because I mean, if they're going and fighting abroad, they're actually within those countries. Even though we don't like the Syrian regime, they are actually engaged effectively in terrorism in a war. So that in itself is wrong. If they then come back here and they engage or try to engage in similar sorts of activity that are unlawful, then the full force of the law should come upon them.
Yes, the woman in pink there.
Many of our young men went to fight in the Spanish Civil War against the fascists, and we didn't have any government worrying about what they were going to do when they came back, even though a lot of them would have been communists who went to fight the fascists. Why is this so different?
Oh, I think this is hugely different. These are often young men. There are others on the panel, obviously, who know more about this than I do, but these are young men...
my turn will come.
I know it will. But these are young men who have a cause, often which means that they would go so far, something that I don't think we've ever seen before in our world, where they are prepared to kill themselves in order to advance their cause and to kill others. So I think they're very different than the circumstances of the Spanish Civil War.
Let's hear from Maajid. I said before you used to be a member of Hizb ut-Tahrir, and then you sort of abandoned that, and a Liberal Democrat now, a rather different kettle of fish. Do you think we should be fearful of people coming back?
Oh, we certainly shouldn't be fearful of Muslims in this country, the vast majority of whom are law-abiding. It needs to be said, and I know that Anna said it as well, but we have to emphasise that if you see somebody that looks like me walking down the street, doesn't mean that they're going to attack. However, having said that, there are more young men that have gone to fight from across the world, they're called foreign fighters, that have gone to fight in Syria than ever went to Afghanistan. So we're dealing with a hardened minority. Now, we've all heard of the Afghan blowback. We're dealing with a hardened minority. There will be a Syria blowback. We have to prepare for it. And I worry because I saw the video of that young man from Cardiff, Muthanna, he's speaking, the one who went over and made that video asking others to join him. And I saw myself in him. And this young man, in 2010, when he was interviewed, said he wanted to be Prime Minister. And he spoke about the problems that the youth were having in Cardiff around him and how he could get involved. Somehow, between 2010 to 2014, we lost him. We lost that young man who wanted to be Prime Minister. And if he had succeeded in his ambition, he would have been the first Muslim Prime Minister in the country. But we lost his passion. And instead, terrorists got to him instead. So the question is, what can we do to make sure that we don't lose more young men like that who come back and attack us?
Well, just briefly explain how because you were lost in the sense that you use it, Hizb ut-Tahrir.
I was lost for 13 years.
Why were you misguided in your own mind? What happened?
I was born and raised in Essex. I faced, until the age of 16, some very, very severe, violent racist attacks with hammers, with machetes, with screwdrivers. I had to watch my white English friends stabbed before my eyes. This was a year before the Stephen Lawrence murder. It's what I call the bad old days of racism in this country. Things have improved incredibly since then. But that's what, and then there was the Bosnia genocide, and then there was the ideological narrative. I was recruited by a hardened ideologue who sort of sold to me a worldview that somehow there was a global war against Islam and Muslims, which is a false narrative, but that's what they're subscribing to. Now, on the solutions, I just want to very quickly say that, look, it's been about 13 years since 9/11, and it's still, until this day, what we don't have is a coordinated strategy across all government departments led by the Communities and Local Government Department to intervene in communities on a civil society level to identify these young men like this guy that wanted to be Prime Minister and provide opportunities so that their energy is channeled in a positive way so they end up on a question time panel instead of in Syria fighting against our country. We've got to provide examples and role models for these young men so that there's positive energy is channeled instead of the negativity.
I'll come to you first, and then I'll come to you over there. Yes.
With the fact that it's been revealed that the government made the mistake of deporting Abu Qatada of terrorist charges of which he's been acquitted, is it possible to justify actions against potential militants who have gone to Syria?
And Soubry.
He's actually been acquitted of one set of charges. The verdicts on the other two are due in September, so he hasn't been acquitted of everything. And by Jove, we did the right thing in deporting that man. Absolutely right.
I think really it's about time we let the Arabs deal with their situation. At the end of the day, we've got our G8, they've also got the Arab league is it, and so on. But they seem to take a step back, and we need to not enforce, not make them do anything, but, maybe push harder so they can deal with their own situation. But at the end of the day, it's a far place from us. Also, in the case of Maajid, Nawaz, I think, I like what you do a lot of the times, but I think you're on the fence a lot of the times, to be honest with you. And then with your, for example, your Twitter, where you, okay, and I don't want me to bring it up, where you sent some photos of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and Jesus and so on. I think you've stirred, all you've got to do is do a slight thing and stir things up in the community. Do you know what I mean? We're Muslim people living in this country, born up and everything, and it just takes a little bit of, just something small to ignite things. And I think you as a politician coming from, like you claim, an extremist group, need to be much more careful about, what you say and what you do.
I think this was about the cartoon of
That's right. I mean, I don't think you needed to do it. No. I've heard your explanation in The Independent, and I think it's a lousy excuse, to be honest with you. I think, it's something that you shouldn't have done. And
what's your... Sorry, I'll let him answer that in a moment if he wants to, but what's your view about people who go and fight in Syria, British men in particular go and fight in Syria, and whether we should be scared of them coming back?
I'm quite astounded by it, to be honest with you, because at the end of the day, we're British people, we're British Muslims, this is our country, and I love my country. I wouldn't have it...
John Prescott. John Prescott.
Well, it's a very difficult question, but I've come to the conclusion, having been involved in the Iraq, which turned out to be wrong, whether they like it or not, but it was about regime change, not about using the UN. I'm glad to see we stopped them going into Syria, right? But it does appear that we're back to the old Crusades, that it looks as if, put on a white sheet with a red cross and we fight the Arabs and Christianity fights Muslims, and we're beginning to see that. Now, I ask the question, all these young men are watching on the television, see all their people that they identify with in a very family way, and feel that they're being slaughtered in many places, driven out of their country. For what reason? For the reason that we seem to think that our open democratic society is what we should impose on them. They probably think it's far different. So in a way we should reconsider what we're contributing to that. But as to the men coming back, which has been talked about, the lads coming back if that's the case, it's not the same as the Spanish Civil War. The situation's far different. But basically, we've now passed terrorist legislation. If you commit offence here, and I'm sure they're going to be checking on when they come back, then that's what you get prosecuted for. If they've committed atrocities in another country, there is the court, whether it applies them to not the international court, to take them. But, everybody's got to start thinking differently about this situation. We are contributing to what these young kids are seeing on the telly as their own people getting knocked about. For what? We better start rethinking it.
Paul Nuttall.
Well, we're talking about 500 Brits who've gone out to fight in Syria. I suspect that would have been a lot more if Haig and Cameron got their way and we got involved in what is essentially a civil war. There would have been double that, which would have been utter madness. I think what we have to do in this country is to tackle extremism. Yes, it has to be done on a government basis, but equally it has to be done from the Muslim communities themselves. They've got to deal with the small, tiny minority of extremists. 99% of Muslims in this country are peaceful, hard-working, obey the rule of law, and they are a benefit to Britain. OK? But the problem is you have a small minority who are basically giving everyone a bad name. This has to be done through education, the teaching of British values in schools, dealing with these pop-up jihadist meetings through our anti-terrorist organisations, and the big one is let's stop involving ourselves in far-flung Middle East wars that have absolutely nothing to do with us.
I thought, incidentally, Maajid, his contribution was excellent. I'm old enough to remember the troubles in Ulster. I used to cover it as a reporter when they were at their worst, the times of the IRA, the Protestant terrorists, etc. And all I can see is The only way you can really solve this is a two-way thing, which is a government thing, in as much as you have to cut off the source of the arms, the weapons that went to the IRA. In this circumstance, I think what all governments have signally failed to do is to cut off this supply of extremist preachers who come in here, and as the father of that boy in Cardiff said he wasn't radicalised by the internet, he was radicalised in a room in Cardiff, in a mosque in Cardiff. Now, how do we resolve that? We've got to stop these sort of people, these radical extremists coming in. The other thing, though, it really does come down to the community. The community in Northern Ireland, the Catholic community, basically got sick to death and did not believe anymore in what was going on. And it's when the community properly trains its young, properly talks to its young people, properly gives them aspiration, that actually, and they make it clear they genuinely do not agree with this, that then it started to change. That's a big responsibility in the government. You must stop the preachers, you must give job opportunities and put money into the area, but it's equally important that the community actually genuinely believes and convinces their young it must not carry on. We must stop this.
Thank you.
I've listened to what's been said this evening, and the Conservative Party, which are the leading party in the country, have got to make a stand on these extremists that are going out of the country and coming back in. You talk about action, but I think the public want to know what you're going to do. When these come back into the country, what action are you going to take?
Well, of course, there is always the fact that we have good intelligence and we have counter-terrorism measures. We've already taken away the passports already, so that they don't even go out there, of at least 64 people. So I think all those measures are there.
And are we talking 500? Are we talking 1,000?
We believe, because it's very difficult, unless you have good intelligence and good counter-terrorism officers and so on, which we do have, but it's always very difficult because we know that one of the points of entry, for example, is be somebody going on holiday to Turkey, and then they'll find their way into Syria or into Iraq. I just want to make two very quick points. I'm actually seeing evidence, certainly where I am in Nottinghamshire, of actually some really good work within my local Muslim community, where I can think of one of my Muslim counsellors who works absolutely with other women to persuade them in relation to the way that they are bringing up their sons and the messages and what that they are giving to their sons in that community. And the other thing which I think is terribly important, which you touched on, which is this fact that there are a lot of these young men who have been marginalised, often because they feel excluded because of racism and prejudice and ignorance, and also because they feel that they have no place and they have no value.
What about when they come back from fighting in Syria? They're going to feel that even more, surely.
No, but I'm talking about before.
No, but the question was about people coming back, and you're the Minister of Defence, you're in the government.
When they come back, what are you going to do?
I was talking about prevention as well as cure.
What would you like to see happen? No, but it's
I think if you're talking a small quantity, if you're talking like 500,
yes,
they can easily be controlled by, for example, you could tag them for a certain period of time, so you can monitor A, where they're going, B, what they're doing, and then after 2 or 3 months and they've settled back into the community, well, leave them alone then.
That's right. If they found that, if we can prove that they've committed criminal
but
offences
we need action.
and they've been involved in conspiracy,
something.
then when they return, then that is what
will happen.
But
it's a criminal act to go and fight abroad, isn't it?
Yeah,
it has been since 1870.
Yes. So, and we know that, and that's why we take the passports away of people. And if we need to change the law, we're also introducing those measures as well, so that when people come back, we can take exactly that action.
Right. Maajid, yes, I want you to be able to just answer the attack that was made on you by the gentleman.
Well, I'm sure it's well-intentioned, and I really understand where you're coming from. Look,
you better just briefly explain what it is for the people who heard
the gentleman was talking because on my Twitter account, you can all go and check it out if you want. On my Twitter account, somebody tweeted an image of the Prophet Muhammad. I, as a Muslim, retweeted the image and said, A, I'm not offended by anyone who's not bound by those rules to tweet the image of my Prophet, and I said, God is greater than to take offence at such basic. It was a cartoon of Jesus saying hello to Mo, and Mo saying, how are you doing? I mean, it was really, really bland. And it just caused a furore. And the reason it did is because it's prohibited within traditional interpretations of Sunni Islam to draw the Prophet. And my point was, look, coming back to all this theme on communities, and this is where I'd like to address you, sir, because I'm coming from where you're coming from. I've served time in prison. I actually opposed the Iraq War from a jail cell in Egypt. And I've witnessed torture. I know where you're coming from. I've seen all the grievances of your worst nightmares. So it's not that I don't empathise with the concerns of the Muslim communities. The issue is that we have got to take a level of responsibility within our own communities to address these issues. If racism was widespread, when I grew up in Essex among the white working classes, responsibility was taken to a point where we have now a black president of America. The debate was shifted in civil society. It's now taboo to be racist. Likewise with homophobia, likewise with anti-Semitism, because that's how civil society debates can shift when people get involved in activism. So my purpose in retweeting the image was to say, look, we have got to open up our faith to scrutiny. We've got to open up our views and our beliefs to scrutiny as everyone else is scrutinised, and we've got to be mature enough not to feel offended when somebody says, I don't agree with this particular view of your religion, but we've got to have an open debate about it, and that's what it means to be in a liberal society.
You're absolutely right, it does have to be tackled within the communities, but equally, we are giving, through our own actions since the turn of the century, we have been given oxygen to these hate preachers because we've been following this sort of neo-con foreign policy where we think we can run round the world acting as the world's policeman and spreading Western democracy to countries that have never known democracies. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. These wars, these civil wars, are none of our business, and we don't want to see any British blood spilt in these countries anymore.
We're going to move on. I'd like to take this question, please, next, from Louise Hingley. Louise Hingley.
With Cameron seemingly having lost the battle over the next European Commission president, does this indicate future failure to renegotiate Britain's relationship within the EU?
It looks as though Jean-Claude Juncker is going to be is going to become head of the President of the Commission. Not beheaded, no, the President. Headed. No, I'm sure UKIP might behead him, but they won't. Paul Nuttall.
Well, I'll get to vote on this in a couple of weeks. It looks...
It'd be rare for you to go and vote for the European Parliament. You're hardly ever there.
Hang on.
How many times have you been there since you've been an MEP? Just on the odd occasion?
My job as Deputy Leader of UKIP is to drive public opinion in this country, and I think we've been very successful.
You're an elected
coming off the back. Let me finish. Coming off the back of winning those European elections, I will get the opportunity to vote on Mr Juncker in a couple of weeks, and I will certainly be voting against his appointment because the European Parliament has that right to veto. Now, the European Union has told us that we're very democratic now, and we will give the European Parliament the right to vote on the European Commissioner. Guess how many candidates we've been given? One. Democracy EU style. The fact is that if Mr Juncker is appointed like we suspect, it will prove three things. One, the European Union hasn't learned anything from the European elections, where there was widespread Euroscepticism across the European Union. Two, Mr Cameron's promise of renegotiation is pie in the sky, because you can't renegotiate with an organisation that doesn't want to enter into negotiations. Thirdly, Britain is more isolated now in Europe than it has ever been. Europe is going this way, we're going that way, and the better off thing for us to do is to leave the European Union, be friends with our European partners, trade with them, but let's leave the politics behind.
All right. Louise Hingley, let me just hear from you before we come to Anna Soubry about this. Just restate what your view is about this.
I think it will be very difficult for him to renegotiate within the EU. But I think it is worth noting that around the time of the in-out referendum, we will have presidency of the Council of Ministers, and therefore he will be able to set the agenda somewhat, but that by no means means that he will be able to renegotiate a different relationship with the EU.
So you think that if it's a failure to get a change over Juncker, presages bad things, really, for the renegotiation?
Yes, I think he's part of the old guard. That's only going to...
All right, Anna Soubry, what's your answer
If we get elected as a majority government in 2015, we've set ourselves the absolute promise that we've got 2 years to look at how we renegotiate our relationship with the European Union. Now, I put my cards absolutely on the table. I hope that we remain a member of the European Union. I have no doubt it is in Britain's interests to remain within the European Union. But I don't like the current arrangement that we have. And I take the view, actually, that it's a view that's increasingly shared across the European Union. I actually think there is a move for change. And I think that in those 2 years, we will be able to establish alliances and we'll be able to seize that mood. And I believe we will be able to renegotiate. And then we will put it to the test. Then we will give people a referendum. And you will at last have the opportunity to decide whether you're in or out. If you vote for UKIP, they can't deliver that. All they do, frankly, is take the money and don't turn up. And I do have to say this. You are paid, sir, to rob.
Yes,
you don't.
hold
let
on.
me finish. You don't.
You know nothing about the European
Excuse
Parliament.
me, just a minute.
Nothing.
Let me just say this. You are an elected representative, not just of UKIP, but of all the people in the constituency that you represent. Just like I am. I don't just represent the Tories in Broxtowe. I represent all my constituents, and I certainly take my responsibility seriously. And I don't just take the money and not turn up to vote.
Hang on. Whoa. Hang on. Over half the votes which go through the European Parliament are non-legislative. They are not worth the paper they are written on. It is a talking shop. It has no power to initiate any laws. The Commission, which meets in secret, actually hands the laws down to the European Parliament to rubber stamp. The fact of the matter is that this is totally and utterly undemocratic, and we will be better off out. For you, Anna, for example, to make the laws of this land. All we want is for the people who make the laws to be the people we elect.
Just to answer Anna's point, do you have any qualms? Do you have any qualms about, as you put it, having a very flaky attendance record, according to the newspapers, the worst of all, and taking round about 600,000 a year
600,000
to do it? Do you have any qualms about that?
I don't take £600,000. I wish I did. Well, an MEP's salary is £81,000, but on top of that, you get... hold on, let me finish. On top of that, you get €301, I think it is, a day to sign in. And as I very rarely sign in, I earn less money than any other MEP.
How many staff do you employ?
Sorry?
How many staff do you
employ? All right, let's not get on. This is getting silly.
My constituency is 7.5 million people. Yours is about 70,000.
You'll no doubt be issuing a writ against the Independent for the £600,000 claim.
Well, I've no idea where that figure comes from, to be perfectly honest with you.
Fine. All right, over a number of years, apparently. But look, let's just come back to this question. Anna, I'll come to John Prescott in a moment. But I know, what is it about Jean-Claude Juncker that is so... I mean, I noticed that your colleague, Ken Clark, said the whole thing's being put out of proportion. It doesn't really matter that much.
I know, and I mean, as you know,
I
don't actually. I don't agree with Ken on this one. And
you think
I agree
the Prime
with
Minister's
Ken.
right?
I do actually.
Yeah.
And it's not about the personalities. It's what... No, not at all. The point is, it's not about the personalities. The fact that we need a new type of way of doing the European Union. And what we don't want is more of the same. And there's a generation almost of people. They're overly bureaucratic, overly bossy. We need a new way of doing the EU if we're to stay in it, as I want us to be in it, in a European Union that works for the people, represents the people, and does the right thing by them. We can do that.
Don't, Paul. Wait. There are others here. Others here, Paul. I know you're keen to keep on and on about it, but we've got to just ask John Prescott his view.
In the 1970s, I fought to get a referendum, and we did get one, and we believed that would take us out of Europe, because I've never believed in a federal Europe. And the free movement of labour and free movement of capital that we've got now is giving us the federal Europe, which I'm still against. But the people voted to stay in. And if you want my judgment, I think they'll vote to stay in again. Now, coming to Juncker, I have worked with him, and I was in the European Parliament for a while. It wasn't a parliament, it was an assembly.
It still is.
Well, it's still got some extra powers it's been given by governments. But in my view, I disagree with him, not because, well, he's kind of decent kind of guy. He believes in a federal Europe. I don't, but so does most of Europe. Then when you come to Cameron's got others in Europe that did want to make some of these changes. He lost them by the way he negotiated. He actually got rid of Merkel by going out and saying, oh, she's on my side. That created chaos in Germany. All the others who were supporting him have left. He's shown incompetence in negotiations again and very bad judgment. That's our Prime Minister.
OK. You said the second row from the back there. Yes.
Yeah, what I think of Mr Juncker personally is neither here nor there, but you keep using the word democracy. Mr Juncker's group is the biggest in the European Parliament. shouldn't they get the top job like the Conservatives do for being the biggest group in the British Parliament?
All right. Neil.
I suspect I'm the only true independent on this, and I suspect I'm probably a bit like Cameron. I really haven't got a clue how to work this out. So, on the one hand, I really, really resent the lack of democracy in Europe. I find it absolutely unbelievable, the idea that they can decide that this man from Luxembourg is going to be effectively the Prime Minister of Europe. President of Europe. And that's not democracy because you haven't got a vote in it. Did you choose? No, you didn't. So I agree, believe it or not, John, I'm with you. I'm against the whole federalist thing. I don't believe that anybody should be telling me about how to run the nuts and bolts of this country. I do, on the other hand, believe in a European if you like, an economic free zone. I'd like the fact that I can move around Europe. I like being part of Europe in that way. I suspect I might, as John pointed out, I might end up voting to stay. But I have to say, every single day it gets harder because they slap the lack of democracy in our face.
Right. And actually... and you, sir, up there.
This whole debate is a prime example of why voter turnout is so low. Nobody really cares about Mr. Juncker or who is the president. It's about what actually happens to the real people. At the moment, we haven't actually had a question that actually affects real people in the UK, and that's why people are so disenfranchised. We have John Prescott there who sat there and moans about the Asians. Yet you were part of the government who voted for a war in Iraq, and that I just find it utterly mind-blowing.
Parliament? Well, apart from the Liberal Democrats, but can I come in? I'm happy that the Liberal Democrats didn't support the Iraq war, but on the EU, yes, it's about the process. How to make it relevant, I think, is that the suggestion of Nick Clegg, what they've been pushing for, is that the countries themselves should have a say as to who is head of the Commission, and not the MEPs, especially those who are elected not to do anything and claim the money for it.
Let's deal with hold on, everybody. Let's stop fighting little battles. Let's come back to the question that the questioner asked.
Yes.
Does the failure over this particular battle mean that the battle to get change will be more difficult?
Well, yes, it will be more difficult, but there are serious concerns that all three parties have taken the same stance in this country, and it's rare that happens, and they've done it. It didn't happen over Iraq, but it's happened over this issue. They've done it because there are genuine concerns that Anna's raised, that everyone on this panel's raised, about, for example, the sheer waste of money in the EU, the bureaucracy, and the way in which the Parliament shifts every year. Millions of pounds are wasted on shifting this Parliament twice a year.
Why did you have a referendum?
Yeah, so that's why we need a referendum.
So why are you against Juncker, is the point?
Because he's of old. Juncker is from the old way of doing things. Yeah, I am. Juncker is the old way of doing things, and there needs to be a new vision for Europe. Look, we all love our Swiss watches. We love our Belgian chocolate, right? We love our German cars, and we all love proposing in Paris, like I did. But the thing is, what we don't like is the waste of money. What we don't like is the waste of money.
I was about to say, you sound like a Tory, but you don't.
And that's why I think a referendum's a good thing, but within Europe, if we stay within Europe, and I would vote for renegotiating within the EU, so we have a hand to play, and we can strengthen our hand within.
They're ignoring us.
Come on.
Well, I think actually everybody in the panel's missing the real point. The real point here is people want to know what are the terms that we want to renegotiate in terms of what are the key factors that people want. Because I know a lot of people in business want to still remain part of Europe, but they're not happy with the aspect of the political, integration and things like that. And also when you look at a day when today, for example, the statistics of immigration shows 400,000 more net migration to the UK, which is not necessarily a problem, but people need to remember we need to develop our infrastructure to absorb these people. And that's the real key issue here. And it's about making the infrastructure available, because people are getting really, really annoyed that it's not the infrastructure which is built. People are very passionate in this country. We have a very, very diverse community, and everybody should be proud of that. But it's the infrastructure is not built designed to absorb this factor.
Does Paul Nuttall have the solution for you or not in UKIP?
I think, to be honest, the idea of being completely out of Europe is very, very, very dangerous. Well, very dangerous.
I'll give you, Paul, just a brief answer now, because we've had quite a lot of this, and I just want to get one last question in before we stop.
Well, look, you know, if Britain did come out, as I said earlier, we could trade, we could be friends with our European partners, but we are the 6th largest economy in the world. We have links to the Anglosphere, we have links to the Commonwealth. This country could stand alone, be more democratic, more free, and have more money. It makes sense to leave the European Union.
Okay. Far better in actually campaigning for what issues are and trying to move people's voting to come back to making more decisions in Westminster.
But Mr. Cameron's already said he's going to campaign to stay in, no matter what the result of the negotiations.
I don't like leaving a serious topic for this, but this is a topic that I know everybody in the country, except for me, is very concerned about. And it's a question from Samina Hussain. Let's just have that before we finish. You've got a couple of minutes.
Does Suarez's 4-month match ban suggest football is soft and violent behaviour?
Is football soft and violent behaviour just for 4 months for biting a shoulder? You never bit anybody's shoulder, John, did you? You probably wanted to, but...
I'm a bit traditionalist like that.
Yeah, just a right hook and...
Well, I told Tony I only did it because he asked us to connect with the electorate, so I did.
Suarez, properly treated? Is it right? Should he have been drummed out of football altogether?
He's a shocker.
He's a shocker.
It's so sad, isn't it? Because he's actually a brilliant footballer. I mean, he's absolutely... Even Paul, we would agree on this, wouldn't we? Liverpool fan. But, I mean, it was outrageous. 3rd time he's done it. Personally, I'd have him, if you could, criminally. He should be charged. And if something like that, he'd be right on the edge of going away. 4 months, I'd make it more, but that would really upset.
I thought Liverpool's selling him, aren't they?
They are now.
Not now. In fact, I think he probably would have got a move to Real Madrid or Barcelona if this didn't happen. I think the fact that he has now gone and done this and we're not going to see him in a red shirt till November means it's going to be far more difficult for us to win the league.
He'd be cheap at the price, won't you? You know, because he won't
Why
go
don't
paper.
he just take his teeth out? Not on the national
We won't go downstairs. I know where we're going with that one. Yes, go on.
Look, this is probably what... I mean, I'm going to agree. I'm going to agree with my UKIP colleague here and say I'm also a Liverpool fan. You know, I've been a lifelong supporter of the team.
Dear, yes, this is very depressing.
And to all the Liverpool fans out there, you will never walk alone. But the thing is here, look, if we've just discussed something about the young men getting involved in violence and the dangers of that and how to stop it. This is not an example to set. Sportsmen need to be setting a better example. They need to be coming forward to pull this country together and not to divide it in this way with such appalling behaviour. So I think it is justified that he's disciplined.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, I can't resist this. This is a great topic to get our teeth into. And I just want to say, if Liverpool get an offer, they should bite their hand off.
All right, that's 2 news and royal headlines for you right now.
We've got to stop, but you look so eager to come in. I'll just bring you in. The young man on the very left there.
Yeah,
yes. Quickly, if you will.
I was just wondering if the BBC was soft on football violence, as they had Joey Barton on the panel a few weeks ago.
True.
Yeah.
Very true.
What kind of an example is that as a panellist?
Oh, we've got John Prescott on the panel tonight.
He was assaulted, to be fair.
He was assaulted.
No, John acted in self-defence. He was, truly, he was, wasn't it?
Yes,
Say it was,
definitely
quickly.
was. Definitely was. There were no charges were preferred.
No,
were
you
they?
didn't.
No. Okay.
Our
hour's up. I'm sorry. Our hour's up. I know you've lots to say on that, but anyway, our time's up. Now, where are we going to be next week? Croydon in South London. We've got Alan Johnson for the Labour Party, we've got Joe Swinson for the Liberal Democrats, and we've got the Deputy Editor of the Daily Mail, Tony Gallagher. And the week after that, we're going to be in Inverness. We have a panel with no politicians at all on it in Inverness. Don't ask me why, but that's where it is. Now, if you want to come either to Croydon or Inverness, just go to our website. The address is there on the screen, or call 0330 123 99 88. We'll get in touch with you. My thanks to all our panellists here and to all of you who came to Wolverhampton to take part in tonight's edition of Question Time, and until next Thursday, good night.
Politics Nights continues on BBC One with This Week next.